I never thought the eyes I fell in love with the moment he was born would be the same eyes that looked away when I was falling. It happened on a Tuesday, a regular, rainy Tuesday. I was standing in the hallway of the hospital. My chest felt tight and my legs were shaking. The doctor had just told me the news. I needed help. I needed someone to hold my hand. I saw him standing there. My son. My David. He was on his phone. He looked up. He saw me clutching the wall, gasping for air. Our eyes met. I reached out my hand. I whispered, "David." And then he did something that froze my blood cold. He didn't run to me. He didn't call a nurse. He looked at his watch. He looked back at me with a face as cold as stone. And then he turned his back. He walked away. That was the moment I died. Not physically, but inside. But wait. Because what I didn't know in that hallway was that David wasn't just walking away. He was walking toward a secret he had been keeping for 3 years. A secret that was about to destroy everything I had built. To understand why that moment hurt so much, you have to understand who we were. I wasn't always this old woman with gray hair and shaking hands. Once I was young, I was strong, and I was a mother who would have fought a lion to save her cub. My husband, Frank, passed away when David was only 5 years old. It was a heart attack, sudden, cruel. One minute he was laughing at the dinner table, and the next, the house was silent. I was left with a mortgage, a leaking roof, and a little boy who cried for his daddy every night. I remember sitting on the floor of our small kitchen. I counted the coins in my purse. We had nothing. The bank wanted to take the house. My family told me, "Mary, give the boy to his grandparents. Go work in the city. You can't raise him alone." But I looked at David, sleeping in his small bed. He was clutching his father's old watch. I made a promise to him that night. I whispered it into the dark. "I will never leave you. I will never look away." And I kept that promise. 3 jobs. In the mornings, I baked bread at the local bakery. My hands were always covered in flour and burns from the oven. In the afternoons, I cleaned houses for rich families. I scrubbed their floors until my knees were bruised. And at night, I sewed clothes for neighbors. I was tired. Oh, I was so tired. There were days when I ate only leftover crusts of bread, so David could have a full meal with meat and vegetables. But it was worth it. David grew up. He was smart. He was handsome. He had his father's smile. I put him through the best schools. I wore the same winter coat for 12 years so he could have new uniforms. When he got into university to study business, I cried tears of joy. I sold my mother's gold ring, the only thing of value I had left, to pay for his first semester. He hugged me then. He said, "Mom, when I am rich, you will never work again. I will take care of you like a queen." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, my heart. He got married a few years later. Her name was Linda. She was beautiful, sharp, and very modern. I tried to love her. I really did. I cooked their favorite meals. I knit blankets for their home. But I noticed small things. Linda would check the price tags on the gifts I gave her. David stopped calling every day. Then he stopped calling every week. I told myself, he is busy. He is building his life. A mother always makes excuses for her child. We are experts at forgiveness. But looking back now, I see the signs. The cracks in the glass were already there. I just chose not to look at them. Few months before the hospital incident, something strange happened. David came to my house. He hadn't visited in weeks. He brought me flowers. Lilies. He knew I hated lilies because they reminded me of his father's funeral. But I smiled and put them in a vase. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I used to count pennies. He looked nervous. He was tapping his fingers on the wood. "Mom," he said, "this house is getting old. It's too big for you. The stairs are dangerous." I laughed. "I am fine, David. I have climbed these stairs for 40 years. He didn't laugh. He pulled a folder out of his bag, a thick blue folder. "Linda and I think it would be safer if you signed the deed over to me, just for safekeeping. You can still live here, but on paper, it will be mine. It helps with taxes." I looked at the pen he held out to me. My hand hesitated. A small voice in the back of my head whispered, "Don't do it, Mary." But then David looked at me with those big, brown eyes. The eyes of the 5-year-old boy who cried for his father. "Trust me, Mom," he said softly. "I'm doing this for you." So I signed. I signed my name. I signed away my safety. I handed him the paper. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He put the folder in his bag quickly, like he was afraid I would take it back. As he walked out the door, he didn't say, "I love you." He said, "I'll handle everything now." I watched his car drive away. I felt a cold wind blow through the kitchen. I didn't know it then, but I had just signed my own death warrant. And the ink wasn't even dry before the first betrayal began. What happened the very next day? What did David do with that paper? Keep listening, because you won't believe who was waiting for him in the car. The weeks after I signed the paper were quiet. Too quiet. I called David, but it always went to voicemail. "I'm in a meeting, Mom." His text messages would say, "Talk later." But later never came. I started to feel unwell. I was getting dizzy spells. The doctor said it was stress and my blood pressure. He told me I needed rest. He told me I needed family support. I tried to tell David, "I'm not feeling well, son," I told him one Sunday. "Take a pill, Mom. You're just getting old," he said over the phone. His voice was impatient. He sounded like he was speaking to a stranger, not the woman who wiped his tears. Then came the letters. Strange letters from the bank. I didn't understand them. They spoke of equity and loans. I put them in a drawer. I thought, David handles this now. He said he would take care of it. One afternoon, I decided to visit them. I didn't call first. I wanted to surprise them with a fresh apple pie. Took the bus. It was a long ride, and my knees hurt, but I held the warm pie on my lap. I imagined David's face lighting up. I walked up to their big, beautiful driveway. And that's when I heard voices coming from the open window. It was Linda. She was laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was sharp and cruel. She actually believed you, she said. Oh my God, David, that was too easy. I froze. I stood behind the rose bush, clutching the pie. Then I heard David's voice. I told you she would sign. She trusts me blindly. The loan is approved, Linda. We can book the trip to Europe next week. The money from the house equity is already in my account. My heart stopped. The equity? He took a loan against my house? My home? The home I scrubbed floors to pay for? But what about her? Linda asked. What if she finds out? She won't, David said. And then he said the words that broke me. She's just a confused old woman. If she complains, we'll just put her in a home, the cheap one downtown. I'm tired of pretending to care about her old stories. I dropped the pie. The plate smashed on the driveway. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. The voices inside stopped. I didn't wait. I couldn't face them. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as my old legs could carry me. I left the broken pie there on the concrete, a mess of sweetness and glass, just like my life. I took the bus home, shaking. I sat in my dark kitchen. I looked at the walls of my house. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the bank. It belonged to his greed. I cried until I had no tears left. But sadness has a funny way of turning into something else. As the sun came up the next morning, I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking. I remembered the woman who worked 3 jobs. I remembered the woman who fought the world for her son. That woman was still inside me, and she was waking up. 2 days after I heard them in the window, the stress took over. I collapsed at the grocery store. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The nurses were kind. They called David. They told me he was coming. I waited. I needed to know if what I heard was real. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was an explanation. I wanted to give him one last chance. One last chance to be my son. I saw him walk in. He wasn't rushing. He was on his phone, checking emails. He walked to the nurse's station. I was sitting in the wheelchair nearby, waiting for my discharge papers. I'm here for Mary, he told the nurse. Is she done? I have a meeting in an hour. She needs care, sir, the nurse said. She is very weak. She cannot live alone right now. She needs to stay with family for a week. David sighed, a loud, annoyed sigh. I can't take her, he said. My house isn't set up for sick people. Just send her home, She'll be fine." The nurse looked shocked. "Sir, she could fall again." "That's not my problem right now," David snapped. That was when I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood up. I walked out of the room and into the hallway. He saw me. He saw me clutching the wall. He saw the tears in my eyes. He knew that I had hurt him. And that is when it happened. The moment I told you about at the start. I reached out, David, and he looked at his watch. He turned his back. He walked out the automatic doors and got into his expensive car. He left me there. I stood in that hallway, surrounded by strangers. I was homeless on paper. I was abandoned by my blood. I was alone. But as I watched his car disappear into the traffic, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. I wiped my face. I stood up straighter than I had in years. "Okay, David," I whispered to the empty air. "You made your choice. You looked away. Now, it's my turn." I didn't go home to cry. I didn't go home to sleep. Instead, I walked out of that hospital and took a taxi to a place David didn't know I visited. A place that held a secret from 40 years ago. David thought he knew everything about me. He thought I was just a simple, poor mother. But he forgot one thing. He forgot about his Uncle Arthur. And he forgot what Arthur left me in a dusty old safety deposit box that I hadn't opened in decades. I was about to open it. And what was inside that box changed the game completely. David thought he had won, but the game had just begun. This is just the beginning of my story. What was in the box, and how does a lonely old woman fight back against a son who took everything? You won't believe what happens next. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the moment I started my quiet revenge. A taxi ride to the old city bank was long and quiet. The rain tapped against the window like nervous fingers, matching the rhythm of my heart. I hadn't been to this part of town in 20 years. The buildings had changed, growing taller and shinier, but the bank, the First National Trust, looked exactly the same. It was a fortress of gray stone, standing stubborn against time. Just like me. I walked in, my coat damp, my hair a little messy from the wind. The young teller looked at me with that same pitying look everyone seemed to have lately. To him, I was just another pensioner, perhaps confused about her balance. He didn't know that inside my pocket, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a heavy brass key that hadn't seen the light of day since 1985. "I need to access box 402, I whispered. The manager had to be called. There was dust on the logbook when they brought it out. I signed my name. My hand didn't shake this time. The anger I felt toward David had turned into something solid, something like steel in my spine. Uncle Arthur wasn't really my uncle. He was my husband Frank's best friend. He was a hard man, a man who didn't trust easily. Before he died, Years ago, he gave me this key. I remember his voice, raspy and serious. He had said, "Mary, you have a good heart, but the world is full of wolves. Even in your own garden, weeds can grow. Keep this for the day the storm breaks the roof." For decades, I ignored it. I struggled. I scraped. I ate crusts of bread so David could have steak. I didn't touch Arthur's gift because I wanted to prove I could raise my son on my own. I wanted David to know his success came from love, not luck. The bank clerk left me alone in the private room. The box was heavy. It smelled of old paper and metal. I lifted the lid. It wasn't filled with gold bars. It wasn't diamonds. It was a stack of government bonds and a savings passbook that had been accumulating compound interest for 40 years. Arthur had been a very, very smart investor. I looked at the final number in the ledger. I sat down on the cold chair. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was enough to buy my house back 3 times over. It was enough to ensure I never had to scrub another floor in my life. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of joy. They were tears of regret. I could have used this money to travel. I could have used it to fix my aching knees years ago, but I saved it. I saved it for a rainy day. And now, thanks to my son, the storm was finally here. I didn't take the money out. Not yet. I took something else from the box. A business card Arthur had paper-clipped to the inside cover. It was yellowed with age, but the name was clear. Sterling and Associates, attorneys at law. I left the bank with my head held high. I didn't go back to the hospital, and I didn't go back to my empty house. I checked into a small, clean hotel downtown. I needed a base of operations. That night, my phone rang. It was David. I stared at the screen. His name, my David, flashed bright in the dark room. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to answer and hear him apologize. I wanted him to say, "Mom, I made a mistake. I'm sorry." I answered, "Hello, Mom." His voice wasn't apologetic. It was annoyed. "Where are you? The hospital said you walked out. Do you know how irresponsible that is? Linda is worried sick." Lie number 1. Linda wasn't worried. Linda was probably calculating how much my hospital bill would eat into their vacation fund. "I am staying with a friend," I said, keeping my voice weak and trembling. I had to play the part. "I just needed some quiet, David. My head, it's very cloudy." "Well, you can't just disappear," he huffed. "Look, we need to sign some more papers for the house insurance. The bank needs your signature again. Can I come by tomorrow?" I closed my eyes. He wasn't calling to check on me. He was calling because he needed another signature. He was rushing. He was sloppy. "Not tomorrow, David," I said softly. "I am too tired. Give me a few days. My mind it is not working right." "Fine," he snapped, "but don't take too long. This is for your own good, Mom." He hung up. He didn't say goodbye. The next morning, I didn't rest. I put on my best Sunday dress and I went to see Mr. Sterling. The man on the card was gone, but his daughter, Sarah Sterling, ran the firm now. She was sharp, terrifying, and brilliant. I sat in her leather chair and told her everything. I told her about the deed transfer. I told her about the loan for taxes. I told her about the hospital hallway. Sarah listened without blinking. When I finished, she didn't offer me tea or sympathy. She opened her laptop. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice cool and professional. "Your son isn't just taking a loan against your house. I'm looking at the public records right now." She turned the screen toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. There was my house. My beautiful little house with the flower boxes I had painted blue. It was listed on a real estate website. "Pending sale," the big red letters said. "He's not mortgaging it," Sarah said gently. "He's selling it. The closing date is set for next Friday. He has power of attorney because of that document you signed. He's going to sell the house, take the cash, and put you in the state-run facility on 4th Street. I felt the room spin. The facility on 4th Street. Everyone knew that place. It was where people went to be forgotten. It smelled of bleach and despair. That was what my son thought I was worth. "Can we stop him?" I asked. Sarah smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "We can do more than stop him, Mary. We can teach him a lesson he will never forget. But you have to be brave. You have to trust me. And you have to lie to him." "I can do that," I said. He taught me how. We spent the next 3 days preparing. It was like preparing for a war. But instead of guns, we had documents, bank transfers, and the element of surprise. David texted me every few hours. "Mom, where are you? Mom, I need that signature. Mom, stop being difficult." I ignored them all. Let him sweat. Let him panic. On the 4th day, I sent him a message. "Come to the house on Sunday for dinner. I will sign everything. I made your favorite roast beef." He replied instantly. "Finally. We'll be there at 6. Sunday came. The sky was gray again. I went back to my house. It felt cold inside, like it knew it was being sold. I went to the kitchen and I started to cook. I peeled the potatoes. I seasoned the beef. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the air, just like it did when David was a boy. I set the table. 3 places. I put out the good china. I put out the crystal glasses. But under David's plate, I placed a single envelope. Wasn't a napkin. It was a letter Sarah Sterling had drafted. I heard his car pull up at 6 p.m. sharp. I heard the car door slam. I heard Linda's high heels clicking on the walkway. They were laughing. They thought this was the victory lap. They thought they were walking in to get the final signature, sell the house, and ship the old woman off to the nursing home. I stood by the window and watched them. David was wearing a new suit. Linda had a new designer handbag. My house, my sacrifice, paid for those things. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my apron. "Showtime, Mary," I whispered. The doorbell rang. I opened the door with a smile. A big, warm, motherly smile. "David, Livda, come in, come in." David stepped inside, checking his watch immediately. "Hey, Mom. Smells good. Look, we have the notary coming in an hour, so we need to eat fast." "Of course, dear," I said. "Come sit down." They sat at the table. Linda looked around the room with a sneer, already mentally redecorating or calculating what the furniture would sell for. So, David said, reaching for the bread, where have you been staying? You had us worried. Oh, just here and there, I said vaguely, pouring them water. David, before we eat, I have something for you. Period. Papers? He asked, his eyes lighting up with greed. Not exactly, I said. Look under your plate. David frowned. He lifted the china plate. He saw the thick, cream-colored envelope with the legal seal of Sterling and Associates stamped on the back. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. He looked at me. The color began to drain from his face. Mom, what is this? I sat down slowly opposite him. I didn't smile this time. I looked him dead in the eye. Open it, David. He tore the envelope open. His hands were shaking. He pulled out the document. It wasn't a deed transfer. It was a revocation of power of attorney, and behind it was a forensic accounting of every penny he had stolen from the equity line. Linda gasped. What is going on? David read the first line. He looked up at me, his mouth open. You hired a lawyer? I did, I said calmly. And that's not all, David. Keep reading. Read the second page. He flipped the page. His eyes went wide. He dropped the paper on the table. No, he whispered. This isn't possible. What? Linda screeched, grabbing the paper. What does it say? It says, I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper, that the house isn't the only thing I own. And it says that as of this morning, the bank has frozen all assets associated with the fraudulent loan you took out. You froze my accounts? David shouted, standing up. The chair fell back with a crash. Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? I have investors. I have the sale pending. I know, I said, picking up my fork and taking a small bite of a potato. The roast is perfect, isn't it? Stop eating, David yelled. His face was red. The mask of the loving son was completely gone. Now I saw the stranger. You are going to unfreeze those accounts right now, or I swear to God. Or you will what? I asked, looking up at him. You will walk away? You already did that, David. You walked away in the hospital hallway. I was busy, he screamed. You were selling my home. I slammed my hand on the table. The glasses rattled. Silence filled the room. Then Linda spoke up. Her voice was icy. David, calm down. She's bluffing. She doesn't have the money to fight us in court. Lawyers cost thousands. She's broke. She looked at me with a smirk. Nice try, Mary, but you can't afford a firm like Sterling. I looked at Linda. I felt a strange sense of pity for her. She really didn't know who she was dealing with. You're right, Linda, I said. I was broke, but then I found a key. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old brass key. I placed it on the table next to the salt shaker. What key? David asked, his voice trembling. The key to the future you thought you were going to steal, I said, and the key to the past you forgot about. But just as I was about to tell them about the bonds, about the power I now held, there was a knock at the door. 3 heavy, loud knocks. David froze. Who is that? I smiled. I think that's the rest of the surprise. David walked to the door. He opened it. Standing on the porch were two police officers and a woman in a gray suit. "David Patterson?" the officer asked. "Yes," David said, his voice squeaking. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding elder abuse and financial fraud," the officer said. David stumbled back. "What? No, Mom! Tell them!" He turned to look at me. He looked terrified. He looked like the 5-year-old boy again. "Mom, please, don't let them take me." I sat at the table. I looked at my son. I looked at the police. This was the moment, the turning point. I could stop this. I could tell them it was a misunderstanding. I could save him one last time. My heart ached. Every fiber of my being wanted to run to him. Sia. But then I remembered the hospital. I remembered the pending sale. I remembered the nursing home on 4th Street. I picked up my glass of water. I took a sip. I looked at the officer. "I have nothing to say to him," I said clearly. David screamed as they handcuffed him. Linda was crying, shouting about her reputation. They dragged him out the door. The flashing blue lights of the police car illuminated my dining room. Then silence returned. I was alone in my house. My house. But as I sat there, staring at the cooling roast beef, I realized something. The war was won. But the cost was everything. And I didn't know it yet, but Linda wasn't done. As the police car drove away, I saw her standing on the sidewalk. She wasn't looking at David. She was looking at me through the window. And she was dialing a number on her phone. Who was she calling? And why did I suddenly feel like the real danger hadn't even started yet? My son was in handcuffs, but my heart was in pieces. I thought I had taught them a lesson. But never underestimate a greedy woman who has just lost her lifestyle. Linda had a secret weapon of her own. Subscribe now, because you need to see who knocks on my door next. The silence after the police sirens faded was the loudest thing I have ever heard. My house, which had been filled with shouting and the flashing of blue lights just minutes ago, was now dead quiet. I sat at the dining table for a long time. The roast beef was cold. The gravy had turned into a thick, unappetizing jelly. David's chair was pushed back, tipped over on the floor where he had kicked it in his panic. I stared at that empty chair. I didn't feel like a winner. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a mother who had just cut off her own arm to save her life. I stood up slowly. My bones creaked. I walked over and picked up David's chair. I set it upright. I smoothed the cushion. "I'm sorry, David," I whispered to the empty room. "But you left me no choice." I spent the next hour cleaning up. I scraped the food into the bin. I washed the plates. I dried the crystal glasses. The rhythm of washing and drying usually calmed me down. It was something I had done thousands of times. But tonight, my hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped a saucer. I kept thinking about Linda. I kept seeing her face in the window of the car. She hadn't been crying for David. She had been calculating. She had been making a call. Who was she calling? I found out the answer the next morning. I woke up early. I hadn't really slept. I made a pot of tea and sat by the window, watching the rain wash the street clean. I was waiting for something, though I didn't know what. My phone rang at 8 a.m. The screen said private number. I picked it up. Hello? You think you're smart, don't you, Mary? It was Linda. Her voice wasn't screeching anymore. It was low, smooth, and dangerous. It sounded like a snake moving through dry grass. I did what I had to do, Linda, I said, my voice steady. You two tried to steal my life. We tried to help you. She lied. We tried to manage your assets because you're clearly getting too old to handle them. And now? Now David is in a holding cell because of you. His career is ruined. His reputation is destroyed. He destroyed it himself when he walked away from me in that hospital, I said. He destroyed it when he forged my signature. Linda laughed softly. Oh, Mary, you have the lawyer. You have the money now. I know about the bonds. David told me everything before they took his phone. You think that money makes you safe? It makes me powerful enough to stop you, I replied. Maybe, she said, but money can't buy everything. For example, it can't buy access to Leo. My heart stopped. Leo, my grandson. He was 7 years old. He had David's eyes and my husband's laugh. I hadn't seen him in 3 months. David always said, Leo was busy with soccer or at a friend's house. I missed him more than I missed my own youth. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying, Linda hissed, that as his mother, I decide who he sees. And I have decided that he shouldn't be around a grandmother who is mentally unstable. A grandmother who sends her own son to jail. You will never see Leo again, Mary. I will make sure he forgets you even exist. You can't do that, I gasped. He is my blood. Watch me, she said, and then she hung up. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. I put my head in my hands and I wept. This was the weapon. This was the knife she had been hiding. She knew she couldn't hurt me financially anymore. So she went for the heart. She went for the one thing I loved more than my house. For 2 days, I didn't leave my bed. But depression was like a heavy blanket. What was the point of winning the house if I lost my family? What was the point of money if I couldn't buy my grandson an ice cream cone? But on the 3rd day, my lawyer, Sarah Sterling, came to my house. She found me in my bathrobe, staring at the wall. Mary, she said sternly, get up. We have work to do. I said, that is not what I want. I looked at her with dull eyes. Let them have it, Sarah. Linda said I'll never see Leo again. I can't fight that. She's the mother. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. She took my hand. Her grip was strong. She is the mother, yes, but you are the grandmother. And in this state, grandparents have rights, especially when the father is facing felony charges for fraud. But Mary, we can't fight for Leo if you look like this. You have to be strong. If you give up now, Linda wins. Is that what you want? I thought about Leo. I thought about his little hand holding mine when we used to walk to the park. No, I said. That is not what I want. Good, Sarah said. Then get dressed, because Linda isn't just threatening you with the child. She's making a move, a legal move. What kind of move? I asked. She filed a petition this morning, Sarah explained. She is claiming that you are suffering from advanced dementia. She claims that your decision to revoke the power of attorney and your aggressive behavior toward David are symptoms of mental decline. She wants the court to appoint a guardian for you. I stood up. Anger, hot and fresh, flooded my veins. She thinks I am crazy? She wants the judge to think you are crazy, Sarah corrected. If she wins, she gets control of your assets again. And she gets to keep Leo away from you permanently for his safety. I walked to the closet. I pulled out my best blue dress. She wants a fight? I said, buttoning the dress with shaking fingers. She will get a war. We spent the next week preparing. Sarah hired a doctor to evaluate me. I passed every test with flying colors. I could name the president. I could count backward from 100. I could remember what I had for breakfast 3 Tuesdays ago. I was as sharp as a tack. But Linda wasn't done. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I expected it to be Sarah, but when I opened it, I saw a woman I didn't know. She was young, holding a clipboard, and wearing a badge that said Social Services. And behind her was Linda. Linda wasn't wearing her expensive clothes. She was wearing a modest gray sweater. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked tired. She looked like a victim. "Can I help you?" I asked, gripping the door handle. "Mrs. Patterson?" the social worker asked. "My name is Ms. Davies. I'm here to conduct a welfare check. We received a report that you are living in unsafe conditions and may be a danger to yourself." "That is a lie," I said, looking straight at Linda. Linda looked down at her shoes, playing the part of the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. "We just need to come in and look around, Mary," Linda said softly. Her voice was trembling. "We just want to make sure you're eating. We want to make sure you didn't leave the gas on again." "Again?" I snapped. "I have never left the gas on in my life." "See?" Linda whispered to the social worker. "She gets very agitated. It's the paranoia." The social worker looked at me with concern. "Ma'am, if you don't let us in, I will have to call the police for assistance. It's just a quick inspection." I stepped back. I had nothing to hide. My house was clean. My fridge was full. "Come in," I said. They walked into my living room. Ms. Davies looked around. Everything was in order. There was no dust. The air smelled of lemon polish. "It looks very clean," Ms. Davies noted. "Check the cupboards," Linda suggested quickly. "She hides things. Rotting food. She forgets it's there." I crossed my arms. "I do not." Ms. Davies walked to the kitchen. She opened the pantry. It was organized. She opened the fridge. Fresh vegetables. Milk. Linda looked panicked. Her plan wasn't working. She needed something to make me look incompetent. Then, Linda's eyes darted to the small table by the hallway. My medication. I took pills for my blood pressure. It was normal for a woman of 70. Linda walked over to the table. "Oh no," she gasped. "What is it?" Miss Davies asked. Linda held up the pill bottle. "It's empty, and the refill date was 2 weeks ago." "Mary, have you not been taking your heart medication?" I frowned. That's impossible. I filled it yesterday. That bottle should be full. I walked over and snatched the bottle from Linda. It was empty. I shook it. Nothing. I don't understand, I stammered. I took a pill this morning. The bottle was full. Then I looked at Linda. She was standing close to me. She had a large purse over her shoulder. And suddenly, I knew. She had palmed the pills. She had swapped the bottle or emptied it while I was talking to the social worker in the living room. It was a sleight of hand, a magic trick. She hasn't taken her medicine in weeks, Linda cried, turning to Ms. Davies with tears in her eyes. She's confused. She could have a stroke any minute. This is exactly what David was worried about. I am not confused, I shouted. She took them. She stole my pills just now. Ms. Davies looked at me. Then she looked at Linda, who was sobbing into a tissue. Mrs. Patterson, the social worker said, her voice changing. It was the voice of authority now. Accusing your daughter-in-law of stealing blood pressure medication is a very serious accusation. It sounds paranoid. It's the truth, I pleaded. Look in her bag. The pills are in her bag. I'm not searching her bag, Ms. Davies said. Mrs. Patterson, based on this and the report filed, this is our decision. I'm going to have to recommend a 72-hour emergency psychiatric hold, just for observation, until we can get you stabilized on your medication. My blood ran cold. A hold? That meant the hospital. That meant the psych ward. If they took me there, even for 3 days, Linda would use that record in court. She would tell the judge, see, the state had to commit her. I would lose my credibility. I would lose the case against David. And I would lose Leo forever. No, I said, backing away. I am not going anywhere. Please don't make this difficult, Ms. Davies said, reaching for her phone. I looked around my kitchen. I was trapped. Linda was smiling behind her tissue. A wicked, triumphant smile. She had won. She had baited me, and I had fallen for it. But then I heard a sound that didn't belong in this nightmare. The front door opened. Grandma, a small voice. We all froze. I looked past Linda. Standing in the open doorway was a little boy with a soccer ball under his arm. He was muddy, he was out of breath, and he looked scared. It was Leo. Leo? Linda gasped, dropping her act. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at practice. I ran away, Leo said, his chest heaving. He looked at me, his eyes wide. I heard you on the phone, Mom. I heard you say you were going to put Grandma away. I ran all the way here. He ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He buried his face in my apron. Don't let them take you, Grandma. Ms. Davies looked at the boy. Then she looked at Linda. Mrs. Patterson, Ms. Davies said to Linda, you said the child was at school. You said the grandmother was a danger to him. Leo looked up at the social worker. My grandma isn't dangerous. My mom is the one who lies. She told Dad to take Grandma's money. I heard them. The room went silent. Linda's face turned pale white. The victim, mask shattered into 1,000 pieces. A 7-year-old boy had just become the most important witness in the world. But Linda wasn't going to let it end like this. She took a step toward Leo. Her eyes were wild. Leo, get away from her right now, she screamed, reaching for him. I pulled Leo behind me. I stood tall. I wasn't just an old woman anymore. I was a fortress. You touch him, I said. my voice low and shaking with rage. And I will make sure you share a cell with your husband. Linda lunged. The pills were gone, but the truth had just walked through the door in muddy cleats. Linda was desperate now, and a desperate animal is the most dangerous kind. What happened when she lunged at us? And what did the social worker do when the truth came out? Felt the wind of Linda's hand before I felt anything else. She didn't mean to slap me. She meant to grab Leo. Her fingers were hooked like claws, reaching for the back of his shirt. But she never touched him. Before I could even raise my arm to block her, a hand shot out from the side. It was Miss Davies, the social worker. She caught Linda's wrist in midair. Her grip was tight, and the look on her face had changed completely. She wasn't the polite bureaucrat anymore. She was a witness to an assault. "Mrs. Patterson," Miss Davies said, her voice like iron, "I suggest you step back right now." Linda froze. She looked at her wrist, trapped in the social worker's hand. She looked at Leo, who was trembling behind my legs. And then she looked at me. For a second, I saw pure panic in her eyes. She realized she had just broken the most important rule. She had lost control in front of the authorities. I was just trying to get my son," Linda stammered, pulling her arm back. "He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's a child." "He seems very clear to me," Miss Davies said, stepping between Linda and us. She pulled out her phone. "And you, Mrs. Patterson, seem very unstable. I am going to call the police to escort you off this property unless you leave voluntarily. And I am filing an immediate report recommending emergency temporary custody remain with the grandmother." Linda's mouth fell open. "You can't do that! She has dementia! She has no money!" "I have eyes," Miss Davies replied coldly. "I saw the pill bottle. I heard the boy. And I just saw you try to physically snatch a child during a welfare check. Leave now." Linda glared at me one last time. It was a look of pure venom. "This isn't over, Mary," she hissed. "You think you've won? You just stole my son. The judge will destroy you for this." She turned on her heel and stormed out the door. We heard her car engine roar to life and tires screech as she sped away. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was safe. I turned around and knelt down. My knees cracked, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around Leo. He smelled like rain and mud and little boy sweat. He was shaking like a leaf. "It's okay, Leo," I whispered, stroking his hair. "She's gone. Grandma is here. You're safe." He buried his face in my neck and started to cry. Not the loud crying of a toddler, but the quiet, shaking sobs of a boy who has been trying to be brave for too long. Miss Davies watched us for a moment. Her expression softened. She put her clipboard down on the table. "I owe you an apology, Mary," she said softly. "I almost let her play me. I am so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said, standing up and holding Leo's hand. "She is very good at acting. My son, he learned from the best." "I'm going to file the emergency order," Miss Davies said. "Leo stays here tonight. But Mary, listen to me carefully. This was just a skirmish. The real battle happens in family court. Linda will come back with lawyers. You need to be ready." "I will be," I said. That night, for the first time in months, my house felt like a home again. I made Leo hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, just the way he liked it. I made him a grilled cheese sandwich. He ate it like he hadn't seen food in days. We sat by the fireplace. The rain was still falling outside, but inside, it was warm. Leo, I asked gently, why did you run away? Was it just because of what you heard on the phone? Leo looked into his mug. He swung his legs back and forth. No, he said quietly. It's because of Dad. What about Dad? I asked. He's scary now, Leo whispered, ever since the men started coming to the house. My heart skipped a beat. What men? The men in the black car, Leo said. They come late at night. They yell at Dad in the driveway. They tell him he owes them money, a lot of money. Dad told Mom that if he didn't get the money from your house, the men were going to hurt us. I sat back, stunned. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just a vacation to Europe or a new car. It was gambling. Or bad investments. David was in debt to dangerous people. That's why he was so desperate. That's why he needed to sell my house so quickly. He wasn't just trying to get rich. He was trying to save his own skin. And he was willing to throw his own mother onto the street to do it. Did they ever hurt you? I asked, my voice trembling. Leo shook his head. No. But Mom said it was all your fault. She said you were selfish. She said you had a pot of gold hidden away and you wouldn't share it. I closed my eyes. They had poisoned his mind against me. But children see the truth. Leo saw who was yelling and who was making hot chocolate. Leo, I said firmly, I am going to fix this. Nobody is going to hurt you, and nobody is going to take you away. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. My lawyer, Sarah, was thrilled when she heard about Miss Davies' report. This is the golden ticket, Mary, Sarah said, pacing around my living room. The social worker is on our side. We have Leo's testimony. We have the fraud evidence against David. We are going to crush them in the custody hearing. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I had a bad feeling. Linda was too quiet. She hadn't called. She hadn't banged on my door. Silence from an enemy is never good. It usually means they are reloading. The day of the custody hearing arrived. I wore my best suit. I held Leo's hand as we walked into the courthouse. Sarah walked beside us, looking confident. We entered the courtroom. It was a cold, wood-paneled room that smelled of floor wax and fear. David wasn't there. He was still in custody, or perhaps out on bail, but ordered not to attend. But Linda was there. She was sitting at the defendant's table. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the expensive clothes or the gray victim sweater. She was wearing a sharp black suit, and sitting next to her wasn't a regular lawyer. Sarah stopped walking. She drew in a sharp breath. "Oh no," she whispered. "What is it?" I asked. "That's Marcus Thorne," Sarah said, her voice tight. "He's the most expensive family attorney in the state. He's a shark, Mary. He doesn't lose. How on earth can Linda afford him?" I looked at the man. He was silver-haired, tanned, and smiling like he already knew the verdict. He looked at me, and his smile widened. It sent a shiver down my spine. The judge entered. We all stood up. The hearing began. Sarah presented our case perfectly. She talked about the fraud. She talked about the social worker's report. She talked about Leo running away. It seemed like an open and shut case. Miss Davies took the stand and testified that Linda was aggressive and unstable. I squeezed Leo's hand. We were winning. Does the defense have anything to add? The judge asked, looking at Mr. Thorne. The shark stood up. He buttoned his jacket slowly. Your Honor, he said, his voice deep and smooth. We don't deny that emotions were high that day. My client was a worried mother. But the allegations of fraud, the allegations of an unsafe home, those are all distractions. He picked up a small remote control. We are here to discuss the competency of Mary Patterson. We are here to prove that she is not fit to care for a goldfish, let alone a 7-year-old boy. Objection! Sarah stood up. Mrs. Patterson has passed every medical evaluation. Medical evaluations can be tricked, Mr. Thorne said smoothly. But technology doesn't lie. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, we would like to submit Evidence Exhibit A. It is a recording taken inside Mrs. Patterson's home 3 months ago, captured by the home security system David installed for her safety. My blood ran cold. I didn't have a security system. Or did I? David had installed a smart thermostat and some smoke detectors a few months ago. Were they listening? Play it, the judge ordered. Mr. Thorne pressed a button. My voice filled the courtroom. It was loud and clear. I hate having to look after him. Rio is such a burden. I wish David would just give him up for adoption so I can live in peace. If he comes here again, I might just leave the door open and let him run into the street. The courtroom gasped. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I never said that. I never, ever said those words. I looked at Leo. He pulled his hand away from mine. His eyes were wide with horror. Grandma, he whispered. No, Leo, I cried, reaching for him. That's not real. I never said that. Order! The judge banged his gavel. It's a deep fake, Sarah yelled. It's edited. It's AI. It is authenticated by a forensic audio expert, Mr. Thorne said calmly, handing a paper to the judge. Mrs. Patterson has a history of private resentment toward her grandchild. She puts on a nice face, but behind closed doors, she is a monster. Linda turned to look at me. She didn't smile. She just winked. A tiny, almost invisible wink. The judge looked at me. His face was hard. Mrs. Patterson, he said sternly, this evidence is disturbing. It's a lie, I shouted, standing up. My son installed those devices. They manipulated it. Sit down, madam, the judge barked. I sank back into my chair. I looked at Leo. He was scooting his chair away from me. He believed it. It sounded exactly like me. It had my tone, my pauses, my breath. I had prepared for a legal battle. I had prepared for lies about my health. But I wasn't prepared for this. Technology was their new weapon. And it was turning my own grandson against me in real time. I sat frozen in that chair, watching the one person I was fighting for look at me with fear. Linda had used a machine to steal my voice and twist my soul. How do you fight a lie that sounds exactly like the truth? And what Leo did next broke my heart into a million pieces. You have to hear what happened in part 5. The judge is about to bang his gavel, and I am about to lose everything. Subscribe now. You cannot miss this.